In our last project, we finished adding the worksheets to our Small Business Management Excel workbook. If you've closed the Excel Small Business Management workbook, then please pause the video right now and open the Small Business Management workbook. Okay, now that you have the Small Business Management workbook open in front of you, we're going to go through each of the tabs and look at places where we might need some sort of extra functionality. So let's go to the Purchase Orders tab. In the Purchase Orders tab, we have date, PO number, purchase order number, the vendor name, the product ID, product description, the quantity, the unit price, and the total amount. Now, remember that total amount is the unit price times the quantity. So this is some functionality that we could add. We can automate it so that the total amount is automatically calculated by multiplying the quantity by the unit price. To do that, click in the H2 cell. That's the first empty cell in the H column underneath total amount. And then click up in the formula bar. That's the bar right above the spreadsheet itself and right below the ribbon. You'll see the FX button in front of the formula bar. That's for inserting a function, which we'll look at some point. But we're simply going to click in the formula bar itself. And once you're in there, type the equals key. Now, equals tells Excel that you're about to give it something to calculate. You could be giving it a function, which performs some sort of action, or in this case, we're going to give it a simple mathematical equation using other cells within our spreadsheet. So after you type the equals key, you don't press anything else, just press equals, and then click in the F2 cell. That's the first empty cell in the quantity column. And you'll notice up in the formula bar, we now have square bracket, at sign, and the word quantity, and then closing square bracket. Now we're going to type an asterisk. Now that is found on the number pad on your keyboard or by holding the shift key and pressing 8 while you're holding shift. And then once you've done that, you want to click in the G2 cell. Again, that's the first empty cell under the unit price heading. Now notice we've got another square bracket, at sign. Now this time we have another square bracket, and then we have unit price and then 2 closing square brackets. The extra square brackets here are because there's a space in unit price. But Excel did all that thinking for you. You didn't have to understand how that worked. You simply had to click. Once you've done that, press Enter. So now that you've done that, you should have either zeros or the dollar sign with a dash in the total amount column. Now, because this is a table, Excel automatically takes the formula you enter in the first row within the table and extends that same formula all the way down. And hopefully it's self-explanatory, but if it's not, I mentioned before that the total amount is calculated by multiplying the quantity by the unit price, and that's all we're doing here. We're simply saying, take the value that is in this row in the quantity column, multiply it by the value that is in this row in the unit price column. And so in each row, it uses that row's values for those two columns. Now, because this is a counting format, I should have this all the way down. All of these cells should look the same. I hope they do for you. If not, hopefully we will figure this out. Okay, so we have a product ID and we have a product description. Now these pieces of information are going to be found, or the product description rather, is going to be connected to the product ID within the products table. I just noticed we have a problem. We have the unit price listed on the purchase orders tab. Actually, we want the unit cost there. So let's click in the unit price column and let's change price to cost. Now to do that, we clicked in the unit price cell in the heading there, so it's cell G1. And then I'm going to click up in the formula bar and I'm going to highlight the word price, or you could simply backspace from the end. And then I'm going to type cost and I'm going to press enter. Now Excel is pretty smart and it tends to fix things for us. But you might think that now we have a problem because in the total amount formula, we used the unit price heading. So let's click over there and see what happened. We can fix it, but actually Excel fixed it for us. We now have unit cost shown in our formula in column H. And if we go down through each of these, we're going to find the same thing there. So this is good. So now how do we get the product description here? Well, I mentioned earlier that Excel has functions. Functions do more involved things than simple mathematical formulas. One of the Excel functions is called VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP looks in a table for a value that we specify and then returns a related value from that same table. So let's click in the E2 cell. That's the first blank cell in the E column under product description. And then we're going to click the FX button. FX is insert function. And when we click that, we get the insert function dialog box. Now, recently used and popular functions appear under select a function down here without having to do anything. Here it says those are most recently used. But there's also a search box. So what we're going to do is type V lookup, and then we're going to click the OK button. And this shows us things that look like VLOOKUP or contain the term VLOOKUP. So you could actually search not just for a function by name, but you could use a search term that has something to do with what it does. But it works with search by name as well. And here is our VLOOKUP function. So if you click on it, you'll get a description. It says it looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. By default, the table must be sorted in an ascending order. So that's all good to know. Once you've clicked on VLOOKUP, let's go ahead and click OK. Now, this gives us a dialog box that says Function Arguments. And it gives us the ability to choose the values that are going to be used in the VLOOKUP function. The first one is the lookup value. Now if we look down here, first we get, again, the description of our function. And then below that, we get the description of the current field that we're in here. So lookup value, it says, is the value to be found in the first column of the table and can be a value, a reference, or a text string. So remember, we can click this little button right here at the end of the text box to select another cell. So we're going to click on that, and then we're going to click the product ID. We're going to choose the product ID column by choosing the D2 cell. We're going to click in the D2 cell, and you notice that will insert the product ID argument here. And then we click this little button at the end of the function arguments dialog box here. That brings us back to the full function arguments dialog. And then we can click in table array. Table array, it says, is a table of text, numbers, or logical values in which data is retrieved. Table array can be a reference to a range or a range name. So for this, we want to reference the products table. So to do that, again, we click that same little button, right? But now we're going to go to the products tab. So click on the products tab. This takes us to the products worksheet. Okay. And now we're going to highlight the products table. So we're going to click in cell A1, and we're going to go all the way down to cell E15. And you'll notice it in the function arguments dialog here, it's going to say table 4, and then in square brackets, pound all. That means we're going to look anywhere in table 4, and that means that the products table is actually called table 4. Now, yours might be numbered slightly differently. That's fine. We're going to look at how those get named in a little bit. Let's expand the dialog box again by clicking this button at the end. Next up, we have column index number. So let's click there. And the description down here says it is the column number in table array from which the matching value should be returned. The first column of values in the table is column 1. Okay, so the product description, if we go back to the products tab, let's do that. The product description is actually the product name. We're going to use those terms interchangeably. So it's the second column in our table. So let's expand this again. And in the column index num field here, we're going to type a 2 because product ID is the first, product name, which is the value we want to return and put into the purchase order product description field, is the second column. Finally, let's click in range lookup. Now these three are bold. Range lookup is not. That means range lookup is optional. So what does it say about range lookup? It is a logical value. To find the closest match in the first column, sorted in ascending order, equals true, or omitted. To find an exact match equals false. So what does this mean? If we don't put anything in here, it's the same as saying true. That's why it says or omitted. So if we don't put anything in here, what's going to happen? Well, it will find the closest match in the first column, sorted in ascending order. Now, how useful is that? If what we're looking up is a product ID, let's say the product ID that we type in is 3, and there is no product ID of 3 in our products table, but there is a product ID of 4, then leaving this omitted or typing true in there is going to give the product description for product ID 4 when we type product ID 3. That's not what we're looking for in this case. So let's type the word false. And then let's click OK. Now we'll have NA here in this column because there is no product ID in the product ID field. Now there are things we could do to make that go away if we wanted to. For now, let's leave it like this, and then in a later video, we'll expand on this formula here. We'll use another function and put the two functions together. Okay, so in our next project, we're going to be using the VLOOKUP field again. That'll give us a little more practice with it. We're also going to be using formulas to create some other calculated fields, like our total amount field here. But before we leave this project, let's click in the product ID field. We'd like our product ID field to be populated using a drop down. And the drop down is going to show all of the products in our products worksheet. Or it's going to show all the product IDs in our products worksheet. So to do that, we need to click in cell D2 and then go to the Data tab on the ribbon. Now look in the Data Tools group and you should see a Data Validation button. This allows you to create rules that say what values are allowed in a particular cell. In this case, we're going to use it to create a drop-down list. So click on Data Validation, and you'll get the Data Validation dialog box here. The Settings tab will be selected, and there's a heading that says Validation Criteria. The very first drop-down is Allow, and so we're going to click on that. Right now we're allowing any value, which usually, might not matter. But in this case, we actually want to provide a list. So click on List. Data between here is grayed out. That's fine. We need to specify the source of our list. So let's click the little button here at the end of the source field. And then click the Products tab. And then highlight cells A2 through A15. So this tells us that the list is going to be made up of the values in the product ID column on the products table. And then click the button here to expand the dialog box again. And that's all we actually need to do. So let's click OK. And now this field is selected. We can see a little drop down here. We click it. No, there's no values, but there will be later. Now if I click in D3, I'm going to notice that there's no drop down there. So what I would need to do is highlight D3 through D15 and then click Data Validation again and recreate the drop-down list. You can rewind the video if you need to see how to do that. I'm going to leave this for an exercise for you to do. Before you leave, make sure to save the current state of your Excel spreadsheet. Just click the Save button up in the Quick Access toolbar, or go to the File tab and click Save. And in our next video, we're going to get a lot more practice with all of these features. But remember, before you start the next video, make sure to add the data validation list to the product ID column for cells D3 through D15. And again, the way you can begin is by highlighting all of those, so you only have to do this one more time. And then simply click Data Validation. And if you need, you can rewind the video to see the rest of the steps. We'll see you next time.